Great. Well, it's great to be here with you today, and I apologize for being a bit disheveled. I had to go out to White Oak first thing this morning, and getting from Silver Spring to downtown Washington turns out to be quite an adventure. There's no metro stop out at FDA. I want it to be noted for any politicians in the room. We should fix that. But I also want to thank Mr. Cohen and Magali, and I wish I had been here earlier to speak with you. And the main reason I'm here is really just to emphasize that the FDA is really committed to do what it can to help move technology through in an appropriate way, and I'll talk just a bit about that as we go through it. The work that you're doing is so critical. We see it every day and hear about it frequently. And it's one of many areas where there's a lot of room for improvement in the therapeutics and diagnostic capabilities that we have to offer people. We're pleased to be part of this collaborative venture and want to continue to do everything we can to encourage and facilitate successful development of effective therapies. By the way, I was really glad to hear the way David described what's happening at the VA, because we're going through a similar set of issues at the FDA. We want to promote therapies that are proven to be effective, but in the interim, as you're trying to figure out what's really effective, people, particularly for problems that don't have solutions already on the market, are interested in getting access to those therapies, and it's something that we work with every day and have a variety of pathways to deal with. In particular, the unique needs of combat veterans are great, and we have to continue to do the research necessary to find the answers. And I'm pleased to say in many cases we have found innovators who have stepped in where they've seen a need in this general area. Product developers like Dean Kamen answered the call to come up with innovative solutions to such problems as how to provide increased range of motion, dexterity, and control options for upper arm prostheses. His DEKA arm system, now affectionately known as Luke, was approved by FDA in 2014. It's the first prosthetic arm that runs on miniature motors and which uses EMG electrodes to pick up signals from the patient's muscles and translate them into precise movements. Importantly, it was partially funded by DARPA as part of the agency's revolutionizing prosthetics program, with the ultimate goal of allowing service members with arm loss to one day have the option of choosing to return to duty. This is just one of many examples of how consortia like are being worked on here can make a difference. For amputees who can't use typical ball and socket prosthetics, there's the osseo-anchored prosthesis for the rehabilitation of amputees, or OPRA device, which uses fixtures that are implanted directly into the amputee's bone that the FDA approved last year. Another device, ReWalk, acts as an exoskeleton for people with lower body paralysis or paraplegia due to a spinal cord injury. This motorized device is worn over the legs and part of the upper body and helps an individual sit, stand, or walk with assistance from a trained companion, such as a spouse or a home health aide. To find a way to control severe life-threatening wounds on the battleground, it's the XSAT dressing, inspired by the foam used to fix flat tires. Rather than foam, it uses small compressed sponges that take just 15 seconds to expand once they're in the wound, creating a temporary physical barrier to blood flow that can hold for 4 hours. FDA approved it about 2 years ago. And earlier this week, I attended an FDA advisory committee meeting to discuss and make recommendations regarding the classification of wound care products containing antimicrobials and other drugs as part of the routine process for device classification. So these are a number of advancements in science and technology to help address injury to limbs, but there's also a critical need for more attention on injuries to the brain and mind, which can require more complex solutions to solve. But as we look at these examples that I've described, I think it shows how often we can look at things happening in entirely different fields, like fixing a flat tire, and see how to apply that technology in a way that can make a difference. The issues that this summit is focused on, finding better ways to diagnose, treat, and potentially prevent PTSD and TBI, have an extraordinary impact on veterans and others and pose amazing challenges. There's been a great deal of study and increasing research across government in this area, including at the FDA. While TBI and PTSD are related and sometimes can overlap, we're well aware that it's important for our purposes to underscore that each has its own specific symptoms. Trauma can have diffuse effects that can require a complex combination of treatments. Not surprisingly, development of treatments have advanced on different paths. While PTSD has several established methods of diagnosis and treatment, in our view, TBI is less well understood, and developments in treatment are ongoing now, but have a ways to go. As a clinician, I'm a cardiologist by training, I'm particularly sensitive to the importance of having the most complete understanding of a patient's condition to ensure proper treatment. This can be especially problematic with TBI and PTSD, where signs and symptoms can be nonspecific and can even appear identical. As we know in the military theater in particular, traumatic injuries can lead to dual diagnoses. This highlights the importance for clinicians both to be wholly aware of the patient's medical needs, as well as strengthen communications with the partnering clinical teams. And it was really good again to hear Dr. Shulkin describe the way that's playing out at the VA. Our role as regulators at the FDA is to help move potential therapies developed by industry through the pipeline. But we do so against the backdrop of the most rigorous scientific analysis, making sure that the necessary evidence is collected to evaluate products and confirm their effectiveness through controlled trials and by other means. The result of this oversight is to make sure that patients get the products, either drugs or devices, that do what they claim they will do. And it's been a real lesson for me in the short time I've been at the FDA to see the way this plays out. Just for example, 92% of drugs that go into phase 1 clinical trials don't make it to market, either because of unexpected toxicity or because they just don't work. And I can assure you, we don't see many that get into early human studies that didn't have a very good rationale and a lot of really smart people who are very confident that the ideas were good and that the product should work. And so the bottom line is there's no way to know what will work without doing the proper studies. But as we've already discussed, we're also aware that during the process of doing clinical trials, we need to make things available that are common sense. I was also taken by the description of the service dogs, and dogs I think are actually quite powerful. Last week I went to the mail facility where 60% of international mail comes into the U.S. You'd be amazed at what Americans are buying over the internet. But our real secret weapon in intercepting bad things that come in through the mail is a cadre of 200 dogs who have beautiful facilities. They live like kings and queens out at JFK Airport. I'd always wondered what these dogs do, but I really got to see it firsthand. They're not only friendly and happy dogs, but they amazingly intercept food or drugs or devices coming into the U.S. market inappropriately. So I was really glad to hear about that. So unfortunately, as I've mentioned, we have many failed studies. And to date, nothing has been approved for TBI because of all the things that have been tried, nothing has yet met the standard of working like other products. Decades of well-designed clinical trials have failed to demonstrate clinically meaningful outcomes in patients, despite ongoing findings and reports of promising treatments and treatments in experimental animal models. Those animal models often address a single spectrum of brain pathology at a focused location, unlike most brain injuries, which are diffuse and heterogeneous in nature. This limited progress stems in part from our inability to precisely diagnose this multifactorial condition, to accurately define patient selection criteria for clinical trials based on injury characteristics, and to reliably measure the effects of treatment over time. And I want to emphasize, as a cardiologist, I'm highly aware that this discussion about how we do clinical trials, identifying the right patients, is not just about the human studies. It's about what you do if a study is found to be effective, so that we will know which patients will benefit from the treatment and who should get it. Therefore, there's a critical need for identifying, developing, and validating biomarkers to enhance the efficiency of clinical trials and to evaluate the potential of TBI diagnostics and treatments. As a step towards achieving this goal, we hosted a meeting just a few months ago, engaging various stakeholders to initiate early discussions on the scientific and clinical considerations associated with the analytical and clinical validation of all categories of biomarkers. The workshop, I think, was a great success, but it also, clarified that we have a long way to go. So I'm really pleased that the research activity is picking up at the more basic level, which we can then translate into human studies. One biomarker under investigation at FDA is brain imaging, biofluid, and physical indicators such as eye tracking and EEG. Recently, advances in flexible microelectronics that are wearable and comfortable to the skin bring us closer to the future where portable EEG technology could be used to detect brain injury in victims of traumatic events such as accidents or explosions. This project builds on current FDA collaboration with DARPA on neuroprosthetic technology. CDRH, our devices group, is also collaborating on research of novel flexible EEG electronics with UC San Diego, Harvard, and Mass General Hospital. To evaluate this new technology for use in humans, FDA needs a scientific knowledge base related to validated brain injury biomarkers and models. This research could help pave the way for the development of field-deployable devices that can rapidly collect and evaluate EEG signals to diagnose traumatic brain injury. We're working to validate results from animal models, and this has begun with human volunteers at the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. We have a ways to go. We know we need more sensitive and objective diagnostic methods to detect TBI. Timely diagnosis is important to prevent repetitive injury and to help develop new therapies. A little later today, you'll hear in greater detail from my colleague Carlos Pena about some of the work we're doing to help move neurological devices from bench to market. One promising development I do want to mention is our approval earlier this year of 2 new devices to assess a patient's cognitive function immediately after a suspected brain injury or concussion. This impact device, also with a pediatric component, which is very important, as you know, are the first medical devices permitted for marketing that are intended to assess cognitive function following a possible concussion. They're intended as part of medical evaluation that doctors perform to assess signs and symptoms of head injury. But they're not intended to diagnose concussions or determine appropriate treatments, really just to test the cognitive skills, a very important component of the overall picture. The results are compared to an age-matched control database or to a patient's pre-injury baseline scores if they're available. We must continue to engage in high-level research and do rigorous evaluation of the data. This will ensure that when we do find treatments, they'll be safe and effective. And I want to emphasize, all across the FDA, there's tremendous excitement right now because we're at this sort of amazing inflection point where if you just look back 5 or 6 years ago and said, would it be possible to have something like a cell phone that could monitor a person's activity continuously in time and then send that data somewhere and store it and compute it so that you could analyze it? We all would have said, you're out of your minds, this can't possibly happen. But now we're going well beyond that with skin sensors and other devices. And some of what I've described today, if you think about in the field, whether it's a football field or a battlefield, the ability to do things in real time and transmit the information so that just-in-time decisions can be made. For us at FDA, it's just an amazing opportunity. So we want to work with you to make this work. We will be tough in the evaluation because the worst thing that can happen to people who are in serious need of a treatment and don't see options would be to be misled that something would work if it wouldn't. So we want to work with you to use the best methods. So many questions remain in this field, and meetings like this one, which bring together the best minds and the latest developments, will help find the answers. FDA recognizes this as a highly sensitive issue and will continue to support veterans and military medicine as we take on TBI and PTSD through research and provide resources to ensure that the solutions we find provide meaningful benefits that make a real difference to patients who need these treatments. So thanks for giving me a chance to speak. I know we have other FDA people here who will participate in the details. As a clinician investigator, the thing that kills me is having to go to meetings, reiterate our real interest in this and not be able to stay, because I love to dive into the weeds of how to make this work, but I will follow with great interest, and I know many people at FDA will also. Thanks again.